Okay, hello and welcome. I'm your host, Darshawn McAway, and we have a special guest today. We have LaDonna Humphrey. She's going to be joining us here in a second. But before she comes on, let me tell you guys who LaDonna Humphrey is. She's the investigative journalist, the private investigator, podcaster, and writer of Strangled and the Girl I Never Knew. Very interesting stories, very unfortunate series of events, but interesting none the least. So we're going to go ahead and bring up LaDonna Humphreys. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat so we can answer them or catch up to them later. LaDonna Humphrey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. This is a moment come true for me because last time I did the podcast, I was telling everybody, "Hey, I got LaDonna coming on," and it was like you had a situation. So you're here. I'm happy. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to talk about your book, The Girl I Never Knew, just briefly. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to bring up your website here in a moment, and
Okay.
let's do it like this. Can you, let's start off like this. Why did you write The Girl I Never Knew?
I had not planned on writing a book about the Melissa Witt case. I've been involved in that case for about 8 years, going on 8 years. And it started off as a journey of me putting together a documentary. And then COVID happened. And, you're stuck at home and we couldn't do our filming. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to write a book. I didn't want to be stagnant in the case. And I had hoped that if I published a book, that we'd be able to get some more information out about Melissa. Had no idea that the book was going to take off the way that it has. So that's
Yeah.
been kind of fantastic. But that's the backstory of why I wrote the book.
Okay. So it's I got a little background noise a little bit. So it's the same issue with the book Strangled. There is it like a part one, part two, volume one, volume two?
It is. This is going to be a three-part series. There's another book coming out. And even though Strangled isn't all about Melissa Witt, Strangled focuses on a lead that happened in the Witt case
Okay.
that was called in because of Melissa's case. So it's definitely tied to her case. And then, like I said, there'll be a third book come out.
Okay, so let's talk about leads real quickly. Uh, how do you take a lead serious?
Yeah, being as involved as I am in the case and have been for so long, and being privy to the case file, I know what's accurate in the case and what isn't. And so, we kind of know when something comes in, if that's going to go anywhere or if it's already been looked at. What
Mhm,
we do though is we log that information and we still turn it over to police. And sometimes we do investigate, but really just the experience that I have in the case and as
mhm.
as active as I have been with the case, you kind of know when it first comes in.
Okay, so let me ask you this: the dark web. How has the dark web changed your perception of the world?
It has definitely changed my life. There are things that I just did not know existed.
Mm,
And there's a lot of organized crime that happens because of the dark web and that's a part of the dark web. But what I didn't know about was something called death fetish. And that's what I talk about in the book Strangled. And so it's been life changing for me. It's been frightening and it's made me want to be more active in educating the community
mm.
on what death fetish is and that it exists because I think people need to know. And I think we've got to get it taken offline.
Yeah. Let me ask you this about the death fetish. Uh, Is it a mental condition or is it something? And I think I heard you say this in your Q&A. Is it something that people are trying to acknowledge that they should feel proud about?
If you have a death fetish, and what I have found is the people that do have a death fetish, they think it's normal. They say that it's normal. They say there's nothing wrong with it, that it's just a normal part of their sexual desire to want to see a woman murdered. Which, you and I know that that's not normal.
Right.
As far as a death fetish itself, it's a paraphilia. Necrophilia, which is a part of death fetish, is a mental illness. And so it's all just kind of intertwined. It's some really scary stuff. I mean, I want people to understand that there are communities of men, primarily men online, that are glorifying the murder of women, and they do it for sexual gratification. That should scare the heck out of all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when I did research this story, if I'm understanding it correctly, was she introduced to a person who was trying to do a film, and that's how they got her, involved?
So in Strangled, the girl that called in the tip to the Wit hotline, her name is Alicia Lockhart. She was involved in a film. She had been kind of tricked, kind of seduced for the money to play this role in what was called a morgue film, where you just lay on a pretend morgue slab and pretend to be dead. And so, that's she was really young and didn't fully understand what was happening at the
Right.
time. So yes, that is the premise of Strangled.
Okay. And did you mention that you're going to come out with the documentary as well?
I am. We're going to launch that on May 20th. And that documentary is called Uneven Ground: The Melissa Witt Story, and we're going to launch that at True Crime Fest NWA that's happening in Rogers, Arkansas. And so that'll be the first time the world has seen the film.
Okay, okay. And this story happened so long ago when I was a kid. I think what she went missing in 1994, 1995?
That's right. Melissa Witt was abducted from Bowling World in Fort Smith, Arkansas on December 1st, 1994. And then they found her body 6 weeks later in January of 95 in the Ozark National Forest.
Okay. Yeah, very unfortunate series of events. A very interesting story. And situations like this kind of like really blow my mind because as of lately, I've been getting into like the whole true crime aspect of things because they are pretty intriguing stories, but they
Right.
end so horribly. I'm not for sure if you've been paying attention to the Alex Murdaugh case, but that particular case has been blowing my mind on how a parent and a husband, if you will, can do what he did and not
Yeah.
show any type of remorse.
Yeah, and got that guilty verdict yesterday. I think the world kind of is on fire over that one. I mean, a lot of people say, he got what he had coming to him, but the true crime genre, which is what I'm involved in, so deeply, it is one of those things that you can get so caught up in, like the evil that's happening in this world. And so the one thing that I try to do to keep me grounded, to stay in that genre, is really just to kind of keep it victim focused and try to keep advocating for those victims and
Yeah,
rejoice in those victories, like last night when we got that verdict,
yeah.
in that particular case. So
So and now, you have a podcast called Deep Dark Secrets. A
yes.
very interesting podcast. Can you give me a little detail about that?
Yes, so Alicia Lockhart and I launched that podcast in late September of 2022. And what we decided to do with that is we had written the book Strangled, but we felt like we had more to say about the death fetish community. And so our first season, and we do seasons are a year long, that first season, it's about death fetish. And really what we're doing is we're exposing death fetish producers, excuse me, and we're talking about different murders that have stemmed from the death fetish community. And it's growing. So far we've got about 15,000 downloads since September. So we're pretty excited about that. That tells us that people are really intrigued about that topic and they want to know more. And I think it's making people open their eyes to some of the real evil that happens in this world.
Yeah. Very interesting podcast, and I can't stress this enough. It's entertaining, it's educational, but it's also disturbing because of what happens to some of the victims that, it's just bad. But it's like you kind of can't get enough of just listening to it to find out did this person get found, was the case solved, and things like that. So you guys are doing a very great job on the podcast. I'm very very intrigued by the podcast. You have a couple of websites. You have whokilledmissywitt.com and your own personal website. What's the difference between the two? They still focus on the same thing?
So my personal website, LaDonnaHumphrey.com, really is just to kind of talk about some of the projects that I'm involved in, the different books, and link to the podcasts. And then the whokilledmissywitt.com website is really just dedicated to Melissa Witt. There's a link to some the books, but that's because it's about Melissa. We primarily use that website as a tool to gather information and to take tips in Melissa's case, that and our Facebook page. And then I have deepdarksecretspodcast.com, and that's just people can contact me there to talk to me about death fetish or if they have a deep dark secret in their community. And so those are the three websites that I run.
Okay. And let me ask this question here about her family. Does she have any surviving family left?
She does. So both of her parents are deceased, but she does have some half sisters, and Melissa also has some other relatives that are
Okay.
still alive.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. I really do appreciate you for your time. One thing I do value over here is people's times on Earth because you just never know with things that happen in life. So I do appreciate you so much for giving me the opportunity to actually see you from a magazine to real life. So it's an honor, it's a pleasure. If you have anything that you want to leave the people with, by all means, go ahead and tell them where they can find you and what you have coming up next.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would want to stress is that we have True Crime Fest NWA happening, and that's in May 20. It's May 20th of 2023, so it's just coming up in a few short months. And we're going to focus on the Melissa Witt case, but we're going to have all kinds of speakers there. So we really invite the community to grab a ticket and come learn more about Melissa's case, but come learn more about true crime in general and how you can advocate and be, a victim advocate. So, yeah, you should come. You come be my guest.
Yeah, I will. I will clear my calendar and come
Okay.
through for sure.
Okay. Well, you can have, I will give you a ticket. So just let me
Okay.
know.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's our time for this evening. We're talking to LaDonna Humphrey. She's the author of The Girl I Never Knew and the book Strangled. If you look at your screen, you'll find those. By all means, go to the description. We have all of her websites inside the description. LaDonna, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. You have a good evening.
No problem.